Alrighty. Thank you for everyone that is attending live, and welcome. For those of you that are watching post-live, we are glad that you were able to join at your convenience. Today's conversation is all around 32-inch block in the construction industry. We are going to be talking with Oldcastle today, specifically around 32-inch block and the collaboration that it has with Construction Robotics product, the MULE. Construction Robotics is a world leader in robotics and automation equipment focused on the construction industry. They have over a decade of delivering breakthrough innovation, and Construction Robotics has really led the way towards implementing a realistic and practical path towards the job site of the future. So on the line today with Construction Robotics is going to be Scott Peters. And from the Oldcastle side, we are going to have Matt Mormon, and going to introduce his team as well to go over the 8832 block that they are bringing to the market. Oldcastle, for those that are not familiar, is North America's leading manufacturer. They are concrete building and hardscape products, committed to improving the built environment through delivery of superior materials and products for the construction and maintenance of infrastructure, housing, and commercial projects. So thank you guys for joining us today. And Matt, I'd love for you to go ahead and lead the way in the conversation, starting with the 8832. And then we'll dive in a little bit on the MULE and actually dive into a case study from Jimmy Z Masonry with the Clark Construction project out of Great Lakes.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. And before I get started, we'll kind of just do a brief introduction. My name is Matt Mormon. I'm the VP of Masonry Sales for Northfield, which is a division of Oldcastle, headquartered out of Mundelein, Illinois. And on the phone, on the Zoom meeting, we also have John Cicerelli with Oldcastle APG, who's our National Commercial Masonry Manager, as well as our three sales managers, Jackie Schulte, based out of our Forestview location, covering the Central region, Jason Diedrich, based out of Sheffield, Ohio, covering the East region, as well as Doug Cohey, based out of Kansas City, covering the West region, and various other architectural and masonry contractor sales reps. So really appreciate everyone joining us today. And with that, I am going to turn it over to John Cicerelli, who is going to walk us through the Oldcastle APG portion of the presentation.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day. Yeah, just real briefly, many of you have heard of Oldcastle. We're actually a division of CRH, which is a holding company in Dublin, Ireland, and you can kind of just see the footprint that we have in the building products industry. Echelon, that's our collection of masonry products. Amerimix, the dry mix division. Belgard, if any of you, like myself, enjoy binge watching DIY Network or HGTV, you'll see a lot of our hardscape products on those shows. We've got a new decking company that's part of our portfolio, and Moisture Shield. Sacrete, which is a DIY concrete product that you'll see in a lot of the home centers. And Technoseal, which is a cleaning and sealing company that kind of works hand in hand with our hardscape division. Next slide. And so really the star of the show today is the MULE, but just to kind of go over the kind of the details of the 8832 block, which we've branded the cool name Supersonic. Somebody mentioned it sounded like a superhero, but that's what we're branding it when we're marketing it to the architectural community. So 8832 unit, we can score it. We can have it scored on both sides. So we've got a little bit of flexibility with the material. Next slide. So just, how did we come about with the 8832? One thing that many of you that have worked with Northfield Block know that Northfield has been making large profile units for a long time, for like 25 years. Cordova Stone, Franklin Stone, the Trenwith Monumental series that have been manufactured by Northfield. So this isn't new. This is in Northfield's sweet spot. And the one thing that the contractors that you do know that it's more difficult to manufacture large units because it takes a different vibration on the machines. The texture is a little bit different. So you really want to work with a manufacturer that has experience in making this type of unit. So before the launch of the 8832, Northfield, in addition to the Cordova stone and Franklin stone lines that had the 16 by 24, 1224, Northfield currently manufactures the 8824 size, a 12.8 by 24 size. And I guess the next thought is, okay, we got an 8832, should we go bigger? And I think the answer is probably yes. The one great thing about the MULE is that it can accommodate even a larger size, which for the contractor means you can encompass a larger square footprint when you're doing your installation. Next slide. And just kind of, this is kind of our, I guess, our elevator speech on the attributes of the 8832 product. So it's manufactured in Morris, Illinois, outside of Chicago. So from a logistics standpoint in the Midwest, it really provides a good reach point to pretty much everywhere that are within a 500-mile radius. So, you know, one question that I got at the World of Concrete that I know Taylor and Scott were at as well is, we were showing the 8832 unit, and some of the contractors come up and say, well, you know what, I don't want to lay that, and it's too heavy. And then when you explain to them, listen, it's a product that's really designed for the MULE and for a hydraulic lift system, they get it, right? I mean, it can certainly be installed, in the traditional method, but it really lends itself to be installed with the MULE. We'll let, I won't go into get into the weeds too much. I'll leave that for Scott and the construction robotics narrative. But the buildings go up quicker. It's a one trade installation. The one thing we've done with the 8832 unit is we've provided some built-in rebar positioning that allows for it to be mortared more easily. It needs a 2-hour fire rating, which is important for the architect. And the only jobs that we've provided so far with the MULE have been the 8832 have been the gray standard color, but it is available to be manufactured in a ground face and a shot blast and some other finishes. And the one thing about the scored units that were used on the Great Lakes project is it provided the look of standard 8816. But if the architect would want that more monolithic look, it can be manufactured without the scores. The gray 8832 are in stock for immediate delivery. And in addition to the efficiencies that the MULE is providing for this size unit, we're really hoping that this is going to allow the general contractors to think of using masonry into areas where it's been maybe discounted over the last 5 to 7 years. And one example is elevator shafts that we're actually getting some calls for with the 8832 unit in concert with the MULE. And then I think we got one last slide, Matt. So we just wanted to show everybody, this is an example of our turnstone ground face with the supersonic, with the 8832 unit. And I think you'll see that you're seeing a polished unit, a beautiful looking ground face unit that you would see that looks, very similar to our 8816 offering. So, so that's our teaser, I guess. I don't know if there were any questions, Taylor, for Matt or myself regarding the 8832 before we go on to.
Yep, we will actually get questions at the end. Today's conversation, we really wanted to give our audience and everyone that's tuning in right now and after the fact an understanding of Oldcastle's offering on the 8832, which you've done a fantastic job, John. So now we're going to go ahead and dive into the MULE as a product, get a little bit familiar on the basics of the MULE, understand how you can use the 8832 and the MULE to really enhance your ROI, optimize your productivity, and then we will dive into a case study and go through questions. So let's go ahead and dive into the MULE. Many of you on this call right now are familiar with the MULE. So we're just going to go over 30,000 feet basics. And then we'll dive into a case study, which I know a lot of you guys are curious about, right? So the MULE itself is what handles the weight of the block. So it allows you to still put your hands on the block for precision. So that's where the cobotics term that we use often comes from. So it does take man and mule. Our genius at Construction Robotics is really on the implementation side. So we tailor the setup of the MULE and the training to fit your job site and your current processes. So this is in the Smart Lift Assist arena. And there are really three main benefits to the MULE, and a fourth one today, if we want to go ahead and look at the fact that the MULE does make 8832 block possible to lift all day long. On top of that, we are also encouraging and working side by side with large block suppliers throughout the country to go bigger, because we do believe that, you know, building bigger is better. So the three main benefits are going to be as follows. It's going to be your productivity line. So the fact that you're able to really increase your productivity leveraging man and mule. The ratio between how many men to the mule really depends on the job. Oftentimes we do 2 to 1. So you have a mason on either side of the mule, you have that 12-foot range, and they're able to kind of get in this cadence of going back and forth. And then one of our best practices is working with the block supplier on block orientation. So your masons are able to lift right from the pallet to really optimize your productivity while leveraging the mule. Oftentimes we're seeing 2 to 3x in productivity on the bottom line, and you know, a return on your investment in as little as 6 months. We do have financing options that are going to be coming available soon, so be on the lookout for an email, you know, soon. And then on the ergonomic side, when we're talking about 8832s, that's really, you know, intense fatigue on any human body, having to kind of rinse and repeat that activity day in and day out. So leveraging the mule is going to reduce that fatigue and that physical wear and tear that's associated in general with that repetitive heavy lifting. And then, of course, the workforce. Right now in construction in general, we're experiencing a labor shortage. We're not seeing as many women enter this particular trade, and you know, certainly not the youth. With a product like the MULE, it really is going to be able to empower us to get a younger, you know, generation involved in this, you know, historic trade, as well as women. So that's very exciting. Just a quick specification on the MULE. Feel free to, you know, kind of study this, showing you it does take AC power from a, you know, small generator per mule. Typical mules on the site is going to be between 2 to 4 mules depending on the project. As I mentioned, Construction Robotics will work with you project specific on this. And then we are, you know, expanding our distribution and dealer base throughout the country. It's been really exciting working hand in hand with Oldcastle on the 8832 and bringing that to market with our clients, be it from architects to general contracting firms to you know, our mason customers. When it comes to use cases, this is just to name a few. So crank up, freestanding, MCWP, frame, pipe. So any of you that have questions on use cases, feel free to write that down and go ahead and ask us any specifics you might have at the end of the webinar. But we do work with all of the, you know, major scaffolding companies, and we, as I mentioned, work with you to really tailor our delivery alongside, you know, your block supplier, working hand in hand to make sure that you guys are able to maximize your return and your productivity. Oftentimes we do get questions around setup. So we say that after, you know, 2 times of setting up the MULE, as I mentioned, your first time will have a CR representation to set up that MULE and to train your field staff and those that, you know, advocate for your field team from a training perspective. After that, you're looking at about a setup of 15 minutes. So really simple process in terms of mobility and setup. And of course, the MULE is really, empowering and enabling the industry to go bigger in terms of blocks. So, right now we're at that 8832, and then, we're looking into the future as continuing to work alongside our block supplier and partnerships throughout the country to continue to bring a larger block to the industry. Today, I did want to stop to discuss a recent case study that we've had, a huge success story with Clark Construction as the general contractor and Jimmy Z Masonry as the mason contractor that recently had a project, the Naval Station at Great Lakes, which Scott is going to appear magically and discuss with us today. So hi, Scott.
How you doing?
Great. So if you could just give us a kind of 30,000-foot view as to what the Naval Station at Great Lakes project was, when they first inquired about the MULE, what that implementation process looked like, and then the adoption, and then of course, we all want to know the production.
Yeah. We had been in discussion with Jimmy Z Masonry for a little while. They were aware of the MULE, and had this amazing project coming up, P714 at Naval Station Great Lakes with I think it was a Clark Blinderman joint venture, Jimmy and team were very excited about the opportunity to look into 8832s. Had worked with the Northfield team in Oldcastle to produce the 8832s and make them available for the project. I think it was a great collaboration really between the mason contractor, the general contractors, which really I think helped clear the way and pave the path for utilizing 8832s, which was a new implementation on this project. And they all really work nicely together. And then where we came in is provided the technology, right? So the exterior shells, there's a lot of block on this project, a lot of, multiple size blocks, as well as Franklin stone around the base of the building. And most of the, really the exterior of the building, behind that brick facade was a block backup. Great military structure. And so there was a lot of 8-inch block on the project. So they value engineered to 8832. And I think approached us, I think it was probably last spring. And we worked with them over the coming months to prepare for the project. Initially, we had targeted about 6 mules on the project. And by the time the project got going, that number had increased to 12. So we actually started the project out there, I think with 10 or 12 mules last September. Got rolling, and there was a number of learnings early on in the first few weeks of the project. There was quite a few learnings, as anyone would expect. You're combining a couple of new technologies. This was Jimmy Z's first time utilizing the mules. It was also the first time with 8832s. And one of the really interesting, but I think pretty cool learnings. It was a little bit painful in the beginning. I'm sure that Jim or Zach would attest to that, but was really around the speed that the 8832s go in the wall. So when you're moving an 8832 to the wall, it's weightless using the MULE, and you're doubling the square footage every time you make a motion to the wall, which is great, but it changes the overall process that you got to look at on your job site and on your scaffold. So on the walls, they typically had a MULE spaced out every 20 feet. So they were using hydromobile scaffolding on this job. They had the mules on the scaffolding. So a typical setup was maybe in the range of 100 feet. So they had, 5 to 6 mules on those walls. And, in that scenario, the block was going in very fast. And what we quickly learned is because of the rebar and the grouting requirements on that project, they ended up with quite a few interruptions that occurred early on. So it took a bit of focus from their perspective to think about their overall workflow and their process. They lay a few courses of block very fast, and then they ended up, the grouting and rebar seemed to be happening almost more often than it normally would. And a lot of that, when you really look back at it, makes sense because the block was going in so much faster. So once you really work through some of the process changes and the impact of that on your job, and they were able to deploy some new methods and techniques to really increase the speed of their grouting and rebar installation. And as they started to get into a rhythm, I think the overall production increased. They also experimented with a number of techniques with the men working with the mules, where I think there was times when they had one man working with one mule, and they would pick off the pallet. The block would come in face up. They were able to set the block on the scaffold and reach back and pick a block right off the scaffold and place it in the wall. And there's some great videos online that you can find on our YouTube channel or on our website, seeing them install 32-inch block on this project. And then, at various points in the project, depending on the type of layout, depending on the team they were working with, they did experiment with other techniques where in some cases you could have a mason who's actually mortaring the wall and another mason who's just picking and placing block. And that allowed the mason who's picking and placing block, who never really had to let go of the mule. And then the person, the mason mortaring the wall could just keep the trowel in their hand and keep mortaring. So there's some different techniques like that. And I believe that there was a few others that they tried. And we've seen this tried in numerous other jobs around the country. But when it comes to larger materials, there's some different techniques that you need to really think about and deploy. Because again, you've just got a larger unit, you got more square footage in the wall. So the overall time it takes to place individual units in the wall is lower in the overall impact of the project. So to really gain speed, gain productivity, and see the big improvements that you can get, there's usually some different techniques you'll deploy. So overall, I think that the team really enjoyed working with the mules. There was a little bit of a learning curve. It's important to make sure the masons get comfortable with the technology, to make sure they're trained, and that they really feel comfortable in not intimidated by the technology, but they're comfortable using it. So we had a technician out there for quite a bit of the project, just training as new masons came on, or retraining masons and working with them as issues came up, and provided a high level of support to make sure they were successful. And they were able to move the mules around the project and install. I forget the exact number, but it was quite a few blocks around that whole project. So I want to pause there, leave some time for questions, and turn it back over to you, Taylor, if you've got more you want to add there.
Fantastic. No, that's great information. As Scott mentioned, we do have some pretty extensive videos in regards to this particular case study and a white paper that you're seeing here. So feel free to reach out to request that of us if you'd like a copy of the white paper, as well as hop over to our YouTube page to check that out too. So as Scott mentioned, we'd love to open it up to have some questions. Anyone that has questions on the 8832 that was discussed by Oldcastle, if you have some tech or project specific questions in regards to the MULE, we are all ears. So I'm going to give you guys just
while we're waiting for questions, I've got a couple I'd like to start with to the Oldcastle team if I can.
Okay, great, yeah.
I was hoping that they could talk about what kind of an area Northfield covers for delivery of the 8832s, how far that they'll kind of stretch their delivery, and then also if they could talk about any other areas in the country where they're seeing interest or where they plan to expand the production of 8832s.
Sure.
Well, I guess the short answer, Scott, is we'll ship anywhere. Anybody that wants to purchase the 8832 unit will certainly supply them. It obviously, I think, from the Chicago area, logistically, from a freight perspective, it makes sense the closer we can get to maybe that 300 to 400 mile ring, if you will. But, I guess you really have to kind of look at, from a cost perspective, where, with the freight, what kind of advantages you're going to get. So I know I'm kind of skirting around your question, but I would think within 500 miles is really where we're targeting from a Northfield perspective. And then your second question regarding other companies, yes, in fact, I was on the phone today with Adams Products in the Carolinas. They're actively looking to manufacture the 8832 unit, and then also in Phoenix, our company Superlight has still been kind of tinkering around with it. So I would say certainly by the beginning, maybe by fourth quarter this year, early next, we will have, I would say confidently, we would have at least 2 more Oldcastle companies making the 8832.
That's great. Thank you, John.
So I'm going to ask any of the panelists, Scott, can you see the Q&A?
I can, yes.
A little technical difficulty. All right, it is not displaying for me, so if you could help me out on that.
No worries. So the first question is, what is the weight of the 8832?
Okay.
One of the, John or one of you, somebody from Oldcastle.
Just throwing it out there that it actually doesn't matter so long as you're using a MULE, but still we'll honor the question.
That's right. If you're using a MULE, it still feels weightless.
Yeah. I think it depends on the you know, what the aggregate composition is, but I think you're looking at 65 to 70 pounds.
Okay. So around 65 to 70 pounds, just to clarify. John, you were cutting it out there a little bit.
Yep, correct.
Fantastic. And then on the Oldcastle side, is this block being manufactured outside of the Chicago area?
Currently, right now, we're just manufacturing it at Northfield's plant at Morris. So that's the only plant currently, Taylor, that we're manufacturing the 8832.
Understood. And are you guys seeing a lot of architects or general contractors starting to have more conversation around starting to, you know, build from the very beginning with the 8832 concept?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we probably, quite frankly, showed it to the architects enough at the beginning. I think, and Scott, you might be able to answer this. I think on the Great Lakes, it was really kind of brought forth by Northfield and the Mason. They were on that really brought it to Clark Construction, I believe. So I guess on the basis of design perspective, Taylor, yeah. I think once architects know that it's available, I think they're excited.
Yeah.
I know that Northfield, I think they've supplied 5 projects already with the 8832. So I think the more that we can get our architectural sales team engaged with the designers at the beginning, I think that's where we'll have our greater success. It's always better to be at the forefront than try to come from behind, if you will.
Sure.
That's great. There was another question of how many blocks on a pallet?
That's a good question.
It's about roughly 36 pieces.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I think other questions were answered. Okay. You know, one thing I wanted to just quickly address, we get this question a number of times, and you know, I think that there's some questions around ROI, right? What is the return on investment with using the 32-inch block? And obviously, you know, as we've talked about here, you know, you can lay a 32-inch block with 2 men if you needed to, but really the big value of the MULE is if you can do it with 1 man, you're doubling your square footage. And what we typically see is a very strong, very strong ROI. If you can double your production. In many cases, you might not be able to completely equal your production. So for example, if you laid a 128-inch block in a day, you might not be able to put 120 32s in a day just because of overall logistics on the job. We have had contractors that have actually exceeded that and have, you know, because it is weightless, been able to really have a exponential increase in productivity. But in many cases, if you get a lot of complications around rebar grouting, you might only get, you know, 80, 90, 100 of the 32s in a day, but you're still significantly ahead of the game. And so really, you know, your labor, you think about your labor cost per block and it's significantly lower. And so that ROI, you know, if you're leasing or financing equipment, it's a matter of days that you're able to pay for your monthly financing costs on the equipment, or if you're renting it, it's really just a pretty short period of time that you're able to pay that back. And we have calculators that we're happy to walk through on an individual basis, you know, where you can enter your rates, enter your production, and really try to get an assessment of the value and the ROI based on the cost of the block, based on the cost of the MULE, and get an assessment. So happy to follow up with any individuals on those specifically.
Fantastic. And you're right. We get questions about ROI constantly, which we really can also better serve you in knowing, you know, what does success look like to you? And then we tailor the process and we essentially hold your hand throughout the process to ensure that you are, you know, receiving the ROI that it is that you are seeking.
Yep.
So right now I did
I got another question here. I apologize,
okay, yeah.
But there was a question: is there anywhere where the 8832 ground face without the score is demonstrated? Is there anywhere that's been seen? Has that been on a project yet?
No, although we're actively promoting it with our finishes, Scott. And the one thing that if people can recollect back to the photo that I showed of our ground face, the one thing that's really cool that architects have shown a really great response to is that without the score, it almost looks like a panelized system. So not to besmirch masonry, but it almost doesn't really look like masonry. It almost looks like a different type of product without the score and with this large profile.
John, are you finding that architects are interested and excited about that new look and that new kind of longer profile?
Yes, yeah. And one thing that Oldcastle did, Scott, is that we have architect validation meetings to just really kind of find out what's popular and what's being specified in the marketplace. And the one comment that they had given us over the last couple of years is that they really like the long lineal look. And we've actually got a couple of other products that we're promoting to the architect that would work very well with the MULE. So yes, to answer your question, anything that's a little bit different than a standard 8816 profile is being very well accepted by the architecture and design community.
That's great. And do you have another follow-up question to that? I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you have the option to either have a fake score in the center of the block or take it out based on the request of the customer?
Correct. Yeah, the one thing that I believe Jimmy Z had talked to Doug Young, who he was working with at Northfield, is that a lot of times scores, once they're shipped to a job site, can get shipped during transport or the way they're handled. And what Northfield actually did is they created the double scored unit so that the mason could pick the best score, if you will, so they didn't have to worry about, auditing block out or having a high scrap rate. I do know that in talking to Northfield, Jimmy Z did not have a challenge with that, but that was one of the considerations that they used for the Great Lakes project.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think I also remember hearing feedback from some of the masons out there that they were pretty easy to lay, and I heard quality was good as well. So I think that was nice to hear with a new product coming to market, the positive feedback of how easily they went in the wall.
So gentlemen, I've really enjoyed the conversation today, and I believe everyone that's watching this live and post live is going to feel the same way. We've really been able to draw clarity around the 8832 being introduced into the industry, what that looks like, and how you can go ahead, access that block in conjunction with a MULE to really increase your productivity, reduce your fatigue on your labor force, and at the end of the day, do what we all are wanting to do, and that's disrupt ourselves and be innovative on the job site. So for those that are curious on, who you need to contact for block and for the MULE, feel free to reach out to Oldcastle or Construction Robotics here through our phone number or sales@constructionrobotics.com. We will go ahead and talk about your project specifically, tailor a plan to you, provide any pricing or technical questions you may have. And at the end of the day, we look forward to serving you. So thank you for everyone that's joined us. Have an amazing rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care.